Are you prepared? It is the day when our Lord will call you. If you go with him, you will be spared. Happy are the ones who keep their wicks trimmed. Lucky are the ones whose lamps are full. You won't need to go and try to buy oil. You'll be ready when the bridegroom calls. Don't wait for warning signs. Our rapture comes at any time. Some will be sleeping, some will be foolish. If you have wisdom, you will be fine. Joyful are the ones who keep their wicks trimmed. Faithful are the ones whose lamps are full. They won't need to go and try to buy oil. They'll be ready when the bridegroom calls. He's
Coming for his bride, so she can be there by his side.
His
Banquet's ready, we will assemble. The gates of heaven will open wide. We are the ones who keep their wicks trim. Blessed are the ones whose lamps are full. You won't need to go and try to buy oil. We'll be ready when the bridegroom calls. Welcome, everyone, to Mary's School of Prophecy. And this is a special program. And I have been struggling all week to get this program together because at first I thought Dana Coverstone's plumb line dream was really simple. Anybody could understand it. And then the Lord woke me up earlier this week at 3:30 in the morning. And I began to realize that it was a very complicated dream and a very significant and important dream. So I've been working on it ever since then, and I keep getting new insights. So, and remember, one of my subscribers told me that I'm only 94% correct, which I don't think is too bad, actually. That's an A in any class that I've ever been in. So if I got all A's, I'm not complaining. But I do sometimes make mistakes. And but I don't mind that because then I correct them. So if you have comments on this video, and this video will be available after today. I mean, this is a live program, which I hope everything is working fine. On this end, everything seems to be working fine. So if you do have comments, don't be afraid to comment. In fact, at the end of this program, I will be going over your comments because I've got quite a bit of time. Now, this dream, Dana Coverstone received between January 9th and 11th of this year. And he calls it the Plumb line dream. And I think those dates are significant, especially for those of us here in the United States, 9th through 11th. And that is significant. And what we find in this dream is the takedown, in my opinion, of both the whore of Babylon, Mystery Babylon, which is primarily the United States, and the taking down of the apostate church. And I think what's important in this dream compared to practically all of Dana's previous dreams is that the man, Dana calls him the man, plays a very important role in all of his previous dreams except the last one and this one. The man basically gives a commentary at the end, and he sums up the dream. Now, he does that in this dream also. But in this dream, he is the leading protagonist, so to speak. And the action revolves around the man. Now, in the last dream, the birds and mall dream, the man has a very important role. And he's described as a tall man. And I thought he was St. Michael the Archangel. But as I say, I'm only 94% correct. So one of my subscribers, or one of the persons who commented on my program, or was it, I think it was on my program, that he said, no, the man represents Donald Trump. And he says, the reason I say that is because he is holding a Scottish sword. Now, I figured he was St. Michael because he's carrying a sword, which, of course, St. Michael does. But I admit the Scottish sword is quite interesting, and Donald Trump is of Scottish ancestry. So that was in the birds and mall dream, and I think, so I am correcting myself. I am now 100% right in saying that the man in the birds and mall dream actually is Donald Trump. He's the tall man. Now, in this dream, the plumb line dream, the man represents 3 different people. So this is quite unusual, and I think we can begin by looking at the first person that he represents, and I will show you that in the first slide. I've broken this dream down into verses just like I usually do, and it makes it easier for me to know where I am, for one thing, in showing these slides on the screen. I saw a bright sunlit sky, no clouds, and I saw the man that I see often in my dreams walking down the streets of New York. And I saw the traditional skyline, even saw the Empire State Building. So I knew exactly where I was. The man was dressed in a first century robe like any Jewish male would have worn in public. And as well, he had a prayer shawl over his head. So who is this man in this case, this first personification? Who is this Jewish man? Well, we will find out that the next man who is shown here, there are the first two different personifications, I believe represent the 2 witnesses, Enoch and Elijah. So this would be Elijah, because Elijah was Jewish. Now, Enoch was not Jewish. So the first man is Elijah, I believe. We will find out. I will see several verifications of that. And here's a question for you. How many of you are aware that Elijah has already told us that he is here right now? And that was in that amazing Australian fire tornado, which came on September the 11th, 2012. If you remember that, I think you can still see that video. Type in Chris Tanguy, I think his name was, Tinguey, and you can see that Australian fire tornado. Well, in that fire tornado, at about the 22nd or 23rd mark, you hear a very faint voice which says, I am here. Very interesting. You have to listen carefully. It's not loud, but it is clear. And I think it's pretty obvious that Elijah could very likely show up in a fire tornado because he was taken up to heaven in a fiery chariot, if you remember. So let's look at verse number 2. His pace was steady, and the people walked by him, oblivious to the fact he was carrying this rope. The rope was hanging down in his hand, and was hanging down to the ground. And at the bottom of the rope appeared to be a large stone tablet that resembled a traditional tablet like the 10 Commandments. And the rope stayed tight. Every step he took, it didn't move. It didn't sway. It didn't move at all. So this is This reference to the Ten Commandments, I believe, is another confirmation that this is Elijah. Elijah came chronologically after the Ten Commandments were given in the Bible, so let's not beyond the realm of possibility that he would carry the Ten Commandments. And here's another question for you. Why did Elijah, when he appeared in that fire tornado in Australia, speak English? Why did he say, "I am here"? I believe that was a warning to the United States. And remember, I told you that the date that the fire tornado occurred was on September the 11th, 2012. In other words, the 11th anniversary of 9/11. That was not accidental. Okay, let's look at verse number 3. And then I found myself that I was walking beside him. I was walking beside him in the dream. And I'm watching this rope that just stands steady and doesn't move at all. So I asked him why the rope and stone never moved, why it didn't wobble as he was walking. And he stated clearly, "My plumb line never moves." And I asked where we were going. And he simply said, "To do business." And then we passed the street sign that said Wall Street. And we walked further down the street. We walked several feet past that sign. And then he stopped and looked into the distance at a taller building. And he held that rope up and he measured the balance of the plumb line against the building ahead. So the reference to Wall Street is very important. I think it signifies that this is indeed Babylon that Dana saw. The harlot, that is Mystery Babylon, in the book of Revelation, is described as essentially a commercial and trading entity. There are most of the description of Babylon is as a trading city or country. By the way, cities and countries can be interchanged in Bible prophecy, and we see that, for example, when end times Jerusalem is described as a Sodom and an Egypt. In other words, both a city and a country. So Wall Street here, I believe, is described as part of Mystery Babylon. Let's look at verse number 4. I could see that the building was obviously tilted away from the line that he was holding. And the man pushed. He put both hands on the building and began to shake it back and forth. And it kept rocking even after he took his hands off. So the building's moving back and forth like this, not up and down, but just sideways and just moving. Some of the windows began to suddenly open. And I saw the office furniture. I saw people who were falling out of these windows as the building swayed. So here's a question for you. Why is Mystery Babylon called a mystery? And it's interesting that St. John does not recognize the identity of Mystery Babylon. That's why he calls her mystery. And I know the false prophets are out there. They're telling you that Mystery Babylon is the Roman Catholic Church or the Vatican or Israel or some other such nonsense. That's all false. It's a if Mystery Babylon, remember the name, her name is written on her forehead. If John recognized the name, like he would recognize Rome or Israel, he would recognize terms like that. But what if the name were New York or the United States? See, that would be a mystery to John. And that's just one more reason why Mystery Babylon refers to our United States, and Wall Street is a perfect description of Wall Street here in Dana Coverstone's dream. Let's look at verse number 5. There were files and there were folders, and there was currency of all kinds. It was not just American currency. There was currency of all kind floating. The dollar bills floating, coins. I saw precious metals. I saw things of value that were just kind of floating down, but specifically currency. And as soon as they hit the ground, this violent wind began to sweep them up into the air, and they never came down again. Now, currency of all kinds, all of these valuables, that is another good symbol of Babylon. And that's because she is described as a great trading city in the book of Revelation. In fact, at her destruction, the destruction of Babylon, all the merchants weep and mourn because of her destruction. That's what St. John says in the book of Revelation. Let's look at verse number 6. Now the people on the ground, they were bruised. They were struggling to walk in their suits. They were all dressed in suits, both male and female, like professional suits. And they were covered in what looked like tar and pitch. It was thick, almost like tar and pitch, and it glued them to the ground so they could move. But they couldn't get up. They were just kind of stuck there, and the pitch had an oily sheen to it. Well, this actually coincides with the description of Babylon in the book of Revelation. Here's what it says. I'll read what the merchants cry out when Babylon is destroyed. And this is Revelation chapter 18, verse 16. And they cried out, "Alas, alas, that great city which was clothed with fine linen and purple and scarlet and gilt with gold and precious stones and pearls." Let's look at verse number 7. And the man then told me to follow him, so I did. So I leave this scene of all the currency that had gone up into the air. Files and folders, and the people were there on the ground. The people were covered in stuff, but nobody else was. Then I could see the Capitol building on the horizon, and we walked briskly toward it, saying nothing on the walk. He had his face set just to go to those places. So let's look at verse number 8. He stood at the bottom of the steps of the Capitol, and he held up the rope in his right hand. And the Capitol was twisted much the same way as the Wall Street building was. The rope was here, but the Capitol was off. It was not lined up straight. Then the man raised his right foot into the air, and he took off his New Testament-style sandal, and then he brought his foot down very hard on the first step up to the Capitol. So this is interesting. The New Testament sandal indicates that this is someone different than Elijah. The man in this dream has taken on a second role, as I said at the beginning. And since, as I say, two people in Bible prophecy, end times prophecy, very often represent Enoch and Elijah. So this would be the prophet Enoch. Now, Enoch chronologically did come before the New Testament. But I think the significance here is that Enoch is a Gentile. In other words, he came before Israel was formed. He came before the Ten Commandments in the Bible. I think he is found in the New Testament, however. And Jude refers to him as the seventh from Adam, which is kind of interesting, because that means that Adam was his great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. 7 generations separated from Adam. So he's very early. And I believe both Enoch and Elijah are here now. We have seen that Elijah is here, and he stated that he was. I believe both Enoch and Elijah are here on the planet right now. And one of their missions is to call out or to order the destruction of Babylon. And we'll see that in a minute. So let's look at verse number 9. I mean, he brought it down hard, and the big building began to rock back and forth. And soon people were falling out of the windows and the doors, documents and desk nameplates that were falling onto the ground, along with people who were all landing on their knees hard. When they fell out of the windows, they just fell on their knees hard. You could actually hear their knees almost pop when they hit. So there definitely would have been pain. And then they were screaming out in pain. So obviously they were in pain. It's interesting that St. John in the book of Revelation says to go out from Babylon, my people, in order to avoid her sins and her plagues. I hope all of you have left Babylon. I've told you many times on this program that there are 4 locations to Babylon. And I won't go into that in this program because I've already covered that very often. And you need to get out of all 4 of Mystery Babylon's 4 locations in order to avoid her plagues and her sins. Verse number 10. If I can find it here, just a minute. These people were then covered in a sticky purple syrup. That was the color. It was a sticky, dark purple syrup that was as thick as molasses, and it was hindering them from walking. They were trying to get up and walk, but they couldn't. It was just kind of gluing them to the ground. They could move, but just not as effectively. When they did get up, they would slip. They would get covered in the mess again. It was all over them. So some of them had the syrup all over their faces, all over their hands, their feet, their knees. Their suits were being ruined, but they were covered. So the punishments, oops, didn't hit the right slide here. Here I am. So now the punishments on both Wall Street and on the Capitol are very similar. I mean, on the Wall Street, they were covered with like a pitch or tar type substance, and here they're covered with a purple syrup. So why did the Holy Spirit give both of these images to Dana? Why not just one of them? I mean, they're quite similar, but are they redundant? And I think that the 2 images are given to make us understand that all of Babylon is indicated, not just Wall Street. The economic system and the government system are both indicted as part of Mystery Babylon. And as I told you, there are 4 locations you have to leave. I think it also shows, it verifies that there are 2 different roles played by the man in this dream. In other words, Enoch and Elijah. And one way to show the 2 roles are to show that there are 2 kinds of destruction. Let's look at verse number 11. Half of them were on the ground weeping. Some of them were laying on the ground in fetal positions and groaning. And some of these people were shaking their fists at the man, but they said nothing. And then they dropped their heads to hide their faces. So they're shaking their fists. They're not saying a word. They're putting their heads down. Half of them were weeping. Half of them were laid on the ground in a fetal position and just groaned. I mean, they just groaned like they were in intense pain. Now, I'll ask you another question. Is there any place in the Bible where the 2 witnesses, Enoch and Elijah, called down judgment on Babylon? Because that's what Dana Coverstone is describing here. And I think it would give verification to Dana's dream if I could show you where Enoch and Elijah do call down punishment on Mystery Babylon. And in fact, that's exactly what we see in Daniel 4, except that Enoch and Elijah are described as a watcher and a holy one. And Babylon is described as a great and bountiful tree. Now, I'm going to show you this passage from Daniel 4, where we see Enoch and Elijah passing judgment on basically the United States, but actually all of Western civilization. And this is Daniel 4, and I give 2 different verse numbers here because the King James is numbered slightly different from the Catholic Douay-Rheims Bible. So let me show you that slide. I think I have it right here. Daniel 4. And this is verse 10 in the Catholic Bible. And it's verse 13 in the King James. I saw in the vision of my head upon my bed. Now this is King Nebuchadnezzar. And behold, a watcher and a holy one came down from heaven. He cried aloud and said thus, cut down the tree and chop off the branches thereof. Shake off its leaves and scatter its fruits. Let the beasts fly away that are under it, and the birds from its branches. Now, doesn't that sound quite similar to Dana Coverstone's dream of the buildings shaking and the people and things falling out and scattering? Both these Dana's dream and Dan's vision tell the same story. I shouldn't say Dan's vision. This was a dream that King Nebuchadnezzar had. Now, we are going to meet the third person, played by the man who appears in this plumb line dream. So let's look at verse number 12. By the way, if you have any comments on what we were talking about, I would welcome them. In fact, I ask you to kind of limit your, you don't have to say hello to each other. Try to ask, and if you disagree with my interpretation, let me know. Because like I say, I'm only 94% right. Verse number 12. And then the man told me to follow him again. At this time the sun was set, and it was clearly dark. It was nighttime. And the next thing I saw was a church building. It was modern architecture. But on top of it, it had a large, seemingly out of place neon green cross on the roof, and it was glowing. And it kind of glowed from like white to green, and almost like it was on a circuit. Then it would go white to green and then fade, white to green and fade, like it was flashing, but doing it very slowly over time. So it was almost like it was set on a switch. It was kind of interesting picture of the church. And I think there are quite a few churches that are like this. They rely on neon signs. And when I first read this, or when I first heard it, I watched Dana Coverstone's video. And I was immediately struck by the similarity to Simon Garfunkel's song, The Sound of Silence, if you've ever heard of that, where the words go, the people bowed and prayed to the neon god they'd made. I always liked that verse. And at the end of that song, the words go, the words of the prophets are written on the subway walls and tenement halls. Very appropriate song, I think, for if my voice was again in good tune, I might sing those verses. And I've always liked that song, Sound of Silence by Simon Garfunkel, mainly because they mention the words of the prophets. So let's look at verse number 13. Well, verse number 13 I'm going to have to read because my slide is missing, and I don't know why. So I will read slide 13. The man walked up to the church, and he took off his outer robe, and he appeared to grow considerably larger than the church. And he placed both hands on the church and lifted them up into the air. He did not place the plumb line out first. He just walked right up to the church. He grabbed it by his hands. He placed both hands on the church and lifted it up into the air. He looked right at me and he said, I warned them. Now I hope the next verses are going to show up here. Anyway, I should have checked that before. I thought I did. Anyway, that was verse 13. And, where am I here? Okay. Yeah, here I am. The man takes off his two items of clothing. You heard me say that. And that indicates that he is no longer Enoch or Elijah. That's why he takes off the two items of clothing. In other words, he is now representing a different person. And then it said he grew considerably larger. Now, what does that mean? Does that indicate who this man is? I'm going to suggest that this new man, the third role that this man is playing is that of Donald Trump, the same as the tall man in the birds and mall dream. So let's look at verse 14. If I have it, I hope I have it. Good. He then shook the church aggressively and violently, and he shook it for several moments. The hands on Wall Street, the hands on the Capitol, had just been like a push. And then he took his hands off. And they began to shake, and they continued to shake. But he actually shook the church aggressively and violently, and he shook it for several moments. And the lights on the cross went out, the windows broke open, I saw the outer walls begin to tear from each other. So if I by physically grabbing the church. This is another distinguishing characteristic, that this is a different person than Enoch and Elijah. Enoch and Elijah, remember, they grabbed the church, but then the Capitol building and the Wall Street building, Enoch and Elijah, they grabbed, but then they let go of those buildings, and they fell down on their own. But this one is different, and that's because this is a different person. This is Donald Trump, and he is grabbing the church and shaking it himself. Let's look at I believe I'm up to verse 15. And then he slammed the church down hard, just on the ground, and the front doors broke open, and the doors actually fell off the hinges. And I watched people stumble out of that church and like they were dizzy, and they started to run away as fast as they could. And as they ran, they were throwing Bibles to the ground and not even looking back. They were trying to get out of there as fast as they could. And this is pretty simple to understand. In other words, the people are abandoning the written word of God, the Bibles, due to the shaking of their church. Their faith is built on sand, in other words. And verse 16. There were people that identified as pastors who were running as well, while covering their faces with a jacket. They brought their jackets up over their heads like kind of like hiding their heads like a hoodie would do. But just the back of the jackets over their head. And they ran and they were running into each other. They were running like crazy, but they were running with a purpose to get out of there as fast as they could. So there's another reference to the word crazy. The word crazy was also used by Dana in the Birds and Maul dream. And this is a reference to the tribulation as Dana describes as the prophet Daniel. Dana and Daniel are quite close. The prophet Daniel describes in chapter 4 where the King Nebuchadnezzar goes crazy. He goes insane for 7 years. Let's look at verse 17. So I identified some of those men and people who were running as pastors and leaders. Many of them just kind of shook their heads and walked out and denied. And there was a group of people that I couldn't see their faces. But as these people walked by, they left the church and walked out of the church. As they were walking by, they were denying even knowing who Jesus was. I never knew him. I don't know him. That's not my church. I just go. Things like that. As if they were embarrassed for even being a part of the church that had just been shaken. They were walking away from it. And they were walking away from it briskly. Some of them were going slower because of the damage of being shaken, but they were just walking away from the church. So it's interesting that these people even denied Jesus. They are going through the tribulation, the shaking, they're going through the test, and they fail the test. And I suspect that they not only denied Jesus, but I believe they also resent that it is Donald Trump who is chastising their church. I think I've got that interpretation right. So, if some of you have a different interpretation, let me know. Verse number 18. And then I was able to see inside the church, and I saw damage. I saw pews that were turned over and broken in half, wood split in many ways in the building. I saw lights that were hanging from damaged ceiling tiles and things like that. And I saw a chandelier. It was hanging all the way. The chandelier was on the ground, and the electrical wire was all the way up to the ceiling. There was that much damage in there. And I think this is pretty obvious. It means that there's no light in the church. And that's what's happening to the church in these end times. And in fact, you Catholics will remember when Pope Paul VI said that the smoke of Satan has entered into the church. And of course, Mary prophesied at La Salette that Rome would lose the faith and become the seat of the Antichrist. Let's look at verse number 19. 19 comes next. And then I saw there was an oak pulpit that was still intact at the front of the church. The platform had been all messed up. You could tell the church had been shaken by this man. Electrical damage, wall damage, structural damage. That pulpit was intact at the front of the church, but had been chipped by debris, and it appeared to be leaning just slightly. And then I saw the altar area, and there seemed to be about hundreds of people, and they were tied together with ropes and even chains. Let's look at verse 20. And they were connected to each other, but they were also primarily connected to the altars on both sides at the front of the church. They were clutching Bibles to their chests, so much that the Bibles had handprints in them, from where you could tell they were clutching them and gripping them, so that the shaking wouldn't rip them out of their hands. That's what I'm supposing. They looked weary. They looked shaken. There were some of them who had been damaged, but they had joyful faces. There were smiles on their faces because the shaking was done. So obviously, I think what we see here is the remnant church, the faithful, the ones that cling to the dogma of the faith, as Mary prophesied in the third secret of Fatima. She said some nations would maintain the dogma of the faith. Some nations would not. I pray that this remnant church will survive the shaking and be faithful, even though we are going to go through difficult times. Let's look at verse 21, I think is next. And there were some in that group, though, as they were tied together, they realized that there were some who had passed away and appeared to have been hit with debris from the shaking. And the ones who remained alive, they were shedding tears for them. But they got up, and they kind of not necessarily untied themselves. They didn't really untie themselves from each other or the altar. But they got up, and they began to kind of clean up the area and kick away the debris. And they were just trying to make sense of what they were seeing. So this is kind of interesting. The image kind of switches a little bit. The faithful are tied to the altars. They are tied to each other. But they're not, and even, in fact, even in chains, as Dana says. But now we see that they are, the faith that ties them together is not really slavery. It's what ties this remnant church together. Let's look at verse 22. Then the man walked in. He looked around as if he was assessing all that he saw. And he said these words, "You took warning, and you were good to do so. Your obedience has been noted, and there will be fruit both here and in heaven. Though shaken and broken, you will arise, my bride, and work until I come." So once again, the last thing he said was, and here Dana Coverstone repeats it, "You took warning, and you were good to do so. Your obedience has been noted, and there will be fruit both here and in heaven. Though shaken and broken, you will arise, my bride, and work till I come." The one thing I want to specify is that both on Wall Street and in Washington, D.C., is that both on Wall Street and in Washington, D.C., this man held the plumb line up. When he walked up to the church, he didn't. He simply walked up to the church with the expectation that they knew what the standard was, and it had been missed. What struck me about the man's summary of what we've just seen is that he says to the faithful church, he says, "Your obedience has been noted." That's the one virtue about the faithful remnant church that the man recognizes. It's very interesting that is the one virtue that Pope Francis opposes. He is also referred to as wormwood, both in the book of Revelation and in Jeremiah 23. Wormwood, of course, means bitterness. And he makes 1/3 of the waters bitter. And sweetness is following the laws, being obedient. Jesus says, "My burden is light and my yoke is sweet." But that's not what Pope Francis wants. In fact, in his apostolic exhortation, Currita Amazonia, he specifically comes out against rules and discipline. It's very interesting that when he conducted the beatification ceremony of Carlo Acutis, he's the young guy who died very young. I think he was like only about 15. This was very recently. Francis specifically praised poverty, chastity, but not obedience. He left that out. That's because he is wormwood. He does not like obedience or rules or discipline. Isn't it interesting that Dana Coverstone in this prophecy, in fact, that's one of the reasons I think that Dana Coverstone's prophecies are true. Unlike Pope Francis, who comes out against obedience, the man in Dana Coverstone's dream is in favor of obedience. So now I'm going to ask you another question. I've shown you that Enoch and Elijah, who in the first part of this prophecy were in charge of taking down the Babylon, that is Wall Street and the Capitol, and that's also found in the Bible in Daniel 4. Is there any place in Scripture where Donald Trump, as the man, overcomes the false church in these end times? Well, as a matter of fact, there is. And I have pointed this out to you many times. So I'm now going to show you one more slide. And this is from Isaiah 45, which is all about our 45th president. Let's take a look at this. Verse number 1 of Isaiah 45. Thus says the Lord to my anointed Cyrus, or POTUS, whose right hand I have taken hold of to subdue nations before his face, and to turn the backs of kings, and to open the doors before him, and the gates shall not be shut. Verse number 2. I will go before you, and will humble the great ones of the earth. I will break in pieces the gates of brass, and will burst the bars of iron. The gates of brass refers to the one world religion. And this Cyrus is a prefigure of Donald Trump. So we do see that Donald Trump's, probably his major role, is to take down the apostate church. And we know that Pope Francis and Donald Trump are at loggerheads all the time. I mean, anytime Donald Trump wants to build a wall around America, Pope Francis comes out all in favor of giving refugees all kinds of Social Security benefits. That's what Pope Francis says. But of course, he has a wall around the Vatican. He never mentions that. So I'm not surprised, but it's interesting that Dana Coverstone's 3 personifications of this man are also verified in Bible prophecy. And in the Birds of Maul dream, we see that Donald Trump destroys the corrupt Republicans and the Democrats. If he's the man holding the Scottish Claymore sword. And here we see that Donald Trump, in this plumb line dream, destroys the apostate church. So now the final question is, does this mean that Donald Trump will be inaugurated as our next president instead of Joe Biden? Well, I'm not ready to say that that will happen, and I'm going to let you make your comments. I'd like to have both sides of you discuss, because remember, Mary said at Fatima that Russia would spread her errors throughout the world, and she did not exempt the United States. But in the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph, Russia will be converted, and an era of peace will be granted to mankind. So now I will turn the program over to you in the comment section, and I will read your comments, and I hope you have some interesting, because I would like to be 100% correct, not just 94%. So, but I don't mind. I have often repeated what contributions that you people have to my programs, and I have no problem in giving people credit for that too, because what's more important is to be 100% accurate, and I always do correct when I do make a mistake, and in my next videos I correct and give a better interpretation. And the cigarette man says he's back. Okay, welcome back. Rosary and Scapular says, thank you, Professor T, for this special program and for leading the daily rosary. Yes, we pray the rosary every morning at 10 a.m., and we're going to need to do that. My sister just called me before the program, and she says there's a visionary in Binghamton, New York, and he said the Lord told him that he is not through with Donald Trump. But we also, of course, have to pray the rosary. In fact, if we're going to get the 10 days of darkness, we would be wise to pray the rosary at the same time every day so that we know that we are praying with everyone else in the World Family Rosary Network. And I pray it every day, as you know. I have since June 3rd, 2018, a live rosary every morning, 10 a.m. Pray with us. Pray with our group. And if the 10 days of darkness does start this next week, and very easily it could, then pray at 10 a.m. That's when I pray. 8 p.m., Sam Fisher on his Pieta Rosary Network. He prays a live stream rosary. 9:30, Kyle on Rosary WMD prays a live rosary. And at midnight, our newest member, Scott, he prays a live rosary on the Mary's Battle Beads channel. And that's how we can stay together as a group. Remember, the 10 days of darkness, we won't be able to communicate with each other. I'm not even sure the phones will be working. The only information we will get is from the emergency broadcast system. And that, of course, is if Biden is not inaugurated. Okay, Sandra Lavinia is here. Mary's Battle Beads. Alan James. Rosary and Scapular. Sayaku. Connie Wright. Joyce Adcock. Chronic Sinner says, you look very dapper today, sir. I applaud a new video. Well, I wore a white shirt and a tie at the last one, the program I did on Dana Coverstone's Birds and Mall Dream, and I thought it looked pretty good, so I didn't have time to put pictures up. I had a picture of Jesus on one side and Mary on the other with my other dream, but I thought this background was complicated enough without adding pictures, so. Pieta Rosary says, thank you, Mr. Taffley. You're welcome. Maxula says, thank you for your wisdom in interpreting this dream. Blessings. I think the Lord did show me most of this stuff, and I think I got most of it right. But if you have some suggestions, please make a comment. Sayaku says, thank you for everything, Mr. T, and for the World Family Rosary, and for sticking together in these end times. Amber Dawn mentions the Ukraine Bolsheviks, the Bolshevik Revolution. And just before the Bolshevik Revolution, Mary appeared at Fatima and warned us. Mary is actually the greatest prophet of these end times. Read her prophecies and you'll see they are still coming true. But I think Dana Coverstone was also true, and as is Kim Clement. Now, Kim Clement said that Donald Trump won't save America. And the church won't save America. In fact, Jesus won't save America. If you follow that Kim Clement prophecy, he says the woman will save America. And I think he's right. And he called her Esther, but we know that Esther symbolizes Mary in the Bible. And he said, before we hated her, but now we love her. Talking, I'm sure, to his own Protestant congregation. They will not understand about Mary. And in fact, Kim Clement received his prophecy on the Feast of the Annunciation, March 25th, 2012, I believe, or 11. Amber Dawn says you're sitting on the ship Citizenship. And then she talks about the beast barcode. Okay, that's interesting. Catherine Gaudreau says 100 trillion stolen from all the people. It's going back to the people soon. Yeah, I've heard that. That could be. Catherine says, why can't this be a human man acting on behalf of the people in the name of God? Well, could be. As I say, I showed you how Enoch and Elijah take down the tree in Daniel 4, and the tree in Daniel 4 represents Western civilization, just as Mystery Babylon does in the book of Revelation. And the primary members of the harlot are the United States and Great Britain. Amber Dawn says, 4 locations. That's right, Babylon has 4 locations, and you have to go out from all 4 locations. Roar Lion says, you're the best, Mr. Tapley, guiding us in these turbulent times. Sister Renee, I'm cleaning and in prayer without ceasing. Yes, Roar Lion mentions, let's see, is it Roar Lion? Yeah, Roar Lion mentions that because Sister says to keep our mind off of these end times and the problems that this country is going through right now. She says, clean your house or straighten your drawers or get busy. And I think that's excellent idea. This I know I'm not used to wearing a necktie. The only reason I wear a necktie is Donald Trump wears a necktie all the time. I noticed Dana Coverstone wore a necktie in one of his videos, but then I think he's gone back to being not quite so formal. Amber Dawn says a box fell and almost hit me. Sorry, devil. I knew the answers. Let's see. What does Amber say here? Purple? Why? Dragon, raptor declared themselves a protected species? I'm not sure what you're talking about there. The Bolsheviks. Adam and Nancy K are here. Sister Renee says, so sorry I came in late. I was in the middle of my prayer time. I have not listened to Dana's dream, so I do not know what's going on, but I will stay and look for trolls. Oh, thanks, Sister. I'm sorry to interrupt you. I asked Sister just before the program if she could help out with the trolls, because you know you're over the target when you start getting flack. Rosary and Scapular says, sounds like the troll church is exposed. He lifted up the churches so we could see what's inside. The deep church exposed. Yes, I think QAnon mentioned once that the Pope would have a terrible May. That did not quite come true the way he predicted, by the way. That's one of the reasons I'm not 100% sure that Donald Trump will fulfill Bible prophecy. I'm praying that he does. Rosary says, thanks to PF the FP, everyone is running from the church. Well, that doesn't quite fit what Dana's talking about, because the people running from the church are not the faithful ones in this prophecy. But you're right, that's what's happening in the Catholic Church. We are separating. The remnant Catholic Church has to separate from the Roman Catholic Church, and we see that separation in Daniel 2, where the stone is cut from the mountain. The mountain represents the Roman Catholic Church. The remnant Catholic Church is represented by the stone, and we will smash the feet of iron and clay. Donald Trump is our leader, by the way, in the smashing of the feet of the iron and clay, which also represents the one world government and one world religion. We are also called the daughter of the robber in Micah 5, and the robber is the Roman Catholic Church, and the daughter, that's us, the remnant Catholic Church. Amber Dawn talks about Joe Biden means forked tongue. Does it? That could be. Also, GS. You can't use his name, by the way, on YouTube. Did you know that? I think Rudy Giuliani started. Was it Rudy Giuliani or someone else who started talking about GS? I'll use his initials on Fox News, and the commentator immediately shut him right up. Oh, it was Newt Gingrich. Yeah, and Newt Gingrich says, you mean I can't talk about it? Fox is no better than any of the other ones. They're all going to be shut down. I hope this 10 days of darkness comes soon. You better have your food and water. Catherine Gaudreau says that 650 cargo planes took all the assets in Rome. They stole from the people. They had housed the money for criminals. The Pope is no longer. Well, you're repeating all those rumors, Catherine, and it may be. I hope the Pope is no longer. Well, we've seen the Pope just recently, so 600. You know how many planes that is? 650 cargo planes. Let's see. My chat just took off, so now I have to go back to where I was. Okay, Catherine Gaudreau, Amber Dawn, Sister Renee. But isn't Pastor Dana a Protestant? He would not be referring to the Catholic remnant in this dream. Are you saying that this is for the Catholic remnant or for Protestants? Okay, that's a good question, Sister Renee. as far as Pastor Dana goes, he's talking about Protestant churches. But I'm sure the Holy Spirit gave him this dream referring to the church. Protestants may not want to admit it, but the Vatican is the head of all Christianity. And I'm sure I will get a lot of hate mail for saying that, but it's nonetheless the truth. They don't have a pope. That should tell you right not there. So the church that he is describing, I believe, is the Catholic Church. All of Christianity, in other words. And even though he doesn't know that. But, I mean, he doesn't understand any of his dreams, and he admits that, and nor do any prophets. A true prophet, Daniel, did not understand any of his dreams. And he complained to the angel. He wanted to know the meaning of his vision. And an angel told him, "Go your way, Daniel. The vision is for another time. Our time." Let's see. Ember Dawn is talking about other things going on. Pamela Vineyard. I'd like to have people talk about the Dana Coverstone's dream. Can't we talk about that? See, that's what we're talked about today. Cigarette Man says that Kim Clement is referring to Esther. Yeah, and at the end of the vision that he received on March 25th, he has the congregation all chant out, "Yes to Esther, yes to Esther." And how many times does he shout out, "Yes to Esther"? He shouts it out 15 times. And he doesn't understand why he did that. And he didn't count the numbers. But the 15 represents the 15 decades in a complete original 3-mystery rosary. Sister Renee says, "Yes, Cigarette Man, it seems like we have Protestant prophets telling us what's going to happen in the Catholic Church. Isn't that interesting?" I think so. Well, the Protestants are prophesied to become Catholic very shortly. John Martin says the dream was about me. Could be. Cigarette Man said 10 days of darkness will only the U.S. or also in Europe. Well, as I understand it, it may not be in all of the United States, by the way. It will include a lot of countries in Europe also. But it will certainly be in the United States. So Ember Dawn, Cristino Casillo. Cristino says, "I think Mr. Trump will continue to be president." Okay, thanks, Cristino. That's what I'd like to have, people. Let me know what you think. John Martin says, "Wasn't it 3 days of darkness? Laugh out loud." Well, laugh at yourself, John. There is a difference between the 3 days of darkness and the 10 days of darkness. Now, should I bother to explain this to you or not? This is when I get upset. And you're not supposed to spread your, what is it? You don't spread your, I'll tell you what the difference is. I don't know why I should. The 3 days of darkness comes at the very end. The 3 days of darkness refers to the end times comet. The 10 days of darkness, that's going to come very soon, and it refers to the taking out of all of our means of communication. It may not happen. That's what we're talking about on this program. Lawrence of America says Dr. Steve was on Alex Jones last Friday. He said that POTUS Trump will be president of the U.S. for the next 4 years, and Biden and others will be arrested. I certainly pray that is true, and I am hoping for that. A lot of what's going on would indicate that. For example, 25,000 troops? My sister said it's up to 30,000 troops in Washington, D.C. My brother says they're amassing National Guard troops in all the state capitals of this country. Why would that be? If Biden were going to be inaugurated, you don't need to have all those troops. You only need those troops if Biden is not inaugurated. Because then the communists will, the takeover of the United States is classic communist strategy. They have done this in many countries before. They know what they're doing. They're taking down the United States, and they're doing it just as they do everywhere else. And if Biden is inaugurated on Wednesday, there will be no going back. There will never be another free election in the United States. You are fooling yourself if you think so. That's the end of this country as we know it. we will be a communist country. That doesn't mean we can't get out of it, but we won't be the United States ever again. There will never be a free election. Some people say, well, Donald Trump can run again in 2024. What kind of wishful thinking is that? There won't be any more elections. Cigarette Man says, I am a Protestant, by the way, not by choice. I grew up that way, but I pray the rosary because of these prophecy videos. Well, thanks very much for that, Cigarette Man. And there's no reason why Protestants can't pray the rosary. I know Protestants who pray the rosary. Sister Renee says, Donald Trump fought for 4 years just to keep his head above the water from the attacks of his presidency, his personality, and his integrity. Common sense would let us know that now that the Lord has allowed him 190,000 indictments, I forgot to mention them, physical proof, electronic proof, video proof, and audio proof, it would seem ridiculous to have him turn his back. Yes, I agree with that. But Donald Trump is a compassionate man, and he is very much on his own. He has very few friends, if any. I hope Archbishop Vicano is with him. Would he let Biden off the hook out of compassion and for a mistaken sense of unity? It would be a huge mistake, but he might do that. That's all I'm saying. And therefore, I'm praying. And I know you got a wonderful confirmation that Donald Trump will be president for 4 more years. Let's see. Cigarette Man says, oh boy, where are we here? Amber Dawn says, Biden and Obama, treason against the United States. That's right. And what is the punishment for treason? Cigarette Man says, Lawrence, I saw Steve Pissell. I can't pronounce that name. I've heard it before. I just can't pronounce it. On Alex Jones, that guy seems cool. I don't know how much one can trust him. Yeah, he comes and goes. He's interesting, I admit that. Amber Dawn. Oh, Maria. Oh, Maria says, I missed the beginning. Is the 10th day of darkness referring to the Exodus darkness or the internet darkness? It would be the internet. Oh, excellent answers. In the internet darkness. Let's see. 3 p.m. Time for the Divine Mercy Chaplet. Bye-bye. Okay, bye, sister. I'm sorry I interrupted with that. I'm going to have to pray it myself after. Piata Sam says, if he is not reelected, we can expect full-blown communism and more censorship. Yeah, total censorship. The communists don't allow any free speech. And further removal of our freedom. If they can silence Trump, they will silence us. Yes, Donald Trump has to fight back. He's our only hope. And that's his mission. And I pray that he does. Ginger Baker says that 9 bishops died on 3 continents last week. No kidding. I hadn't heard that. Cigarette Man says, I believe if God allows Trump to arrest those people, then he will. He might be paralyzed now. I don't believe he will willingly give up. This is the moment of the battle. That's why I hate disinfo. Yes, well, you have to understand that I'm not saying one way or the other what's going to happen because I don't know. I'm not on the inside. I do know what's... I'll tell you who I listen to, who I think is the best. And that would be Praying Medic and X22 Report. And you can't find them if you go on Google. Google has censored even searching for them, which tells you that they're probably true. And you have to go to a search engine like DuckDuckGo and type in X22. In fact, yesterday, X22 interviewed Praying Medic. And what they are saying strikes me as the most logical. Maybe some of you don't like that. Let's see here. My chat is not cooperating here. I can't see it very well. Cigarette Man telling us that everyone is already arrested. Oh, yeah, you would call that disinfo, and I agree with that. In fact, the Praying Medic said that some of these people that we've been listening to have already backtracked. And I think a lot of them want views, and they make a headline saying, let's see, what are the headlines I saw? Well, I won't bother mentioning. They put in headlines like that, or Pope arrested, or something like that. And it gets a lot of views, but it's disinfo, as Cigarette Man says. Ember Dawn talks about 650 cargo planes. Very, very few mention that, but I know some people do. I think that's a rumor myself. Pray 153, Pamela Vineyard, says Trump will continue. Okay, thanks, Pamela. Pray 153 said the wedding feast of Cana was for today's Latin Mass. Really? That's interesting. Lana Doris says, thank you. Cigarette Man says, compassion for pedos is no compassion. Well, that's right. I agree with that. And I pray that Donald Trump does bring them to justice. In fact, I think one of the reasons he is waiting until the bitter end is to give them a chance to repent. I think if Biden, between now and Wednesday, if he were to concede, I think Trump would go easy on him. And I think Trump is giving him every chance in the world to back off. Let's see. Sister Renee is back from praying my chapel to mercy. Okay, great. And William is really giving some good advice about the 3 days of darkness and the communist takeover. Keep it going, William. You're doing great. Okay. Karen says, listening, very interesting. Have not seen the video yet, but I will watch it later. Yeah, just go to Dana Coverstone's channel and look for his Plumb line dream. That's I think his newest dream. Maybe he's got a newer one since then, but I don't think so. Let's see. Laura Maurer, I think, is new on here. Welcome aboard. And Truth and Art TV is excellent. Oh, I don't think I've ever been. Maybe I've seen them once. Truth and Art TV. Okay, I'll have to check them out. Jules Jew is here. Lana Dormis. I feel like I have been in purgatory all this time since this frog election. If Trump loses, it will be hell. How true it is, Lana. We shouldn't give up hope, though, if Trump does lose. As Sister Renee says, God is in charge, and if he allows a communist takeover, why should we think that we're better than other countries that have suffered under communism? Molly May says, a friend of mine is in D.C. with the National Guard. He just returned from Afghanistan. His mother said that she fears more with him being in D.C. than when he was in Afghanistan. Okay, Molly May, I think that's a good comment. And let's end on that comment. The chat is just about over. So I want to thank everybody for being here. Don't forget, Rosary tonight, live stream Rosary at 8 p.m. Sam Fisher on his Piata Rosary channel. 9:30 p.m. Kyle on his Rosary WMD channel. And, of course, at midnight, we have the comedian of our group. I guess if you have managed to stay awake all during the day and by midnight, things start getting funny. And that's Scott is a funny guy. He shows a picture of his wife with cucumbers for eyes. Anyway, I'll be there, I guarantee you, at midnight. And I hope to see all of you. If not at any of those rosaries, I'll see you tomorrow, bright and early. And we're coming down to the wire. The countdown is on right now, people. So don't forget. And don't forget to pray at those times if the 10 days of darkness has begun by the time we get up tomorrow morning and you can't get on the internet, you can't get on the app, you can't get on the television, pray the rosary at 10 a.m. because there will be a lot of people praying with you. So until I do see all of you again, may God bless all of you, and may all of you have a very blessed day.